Hello all, welcome to the Lunar Sea Spire Cartoon Fan Podcast. This is episode 332, and today I'll be talking that director's cut from Summer Camp Island. I'm GC13.
And I'm David.
So, 2 months since our last regular podcast episode about Summer Camp Island, and we just so happen, through sheer fluke of scheduling, be on the episode that introduced a lot of the elements that were touched on in the big picture of the Susie Ramona episodes.
Yeah, I had forgotten how much this episode revealed, because first when Oscar just sort of mentions, he's sort of musing to himself, wait, there used to be monsters in New Jersey? And the answer is yes, but then they actually get into it in full at the end. And I had on mind, you know, how much is retcon and how much was planned ahead of time. Clearly, the big picture of the story was planned out, but I know that you have some qualms about the specifics and timings of how the island comes to be. And I'm definitely questioning how... So, like, the witches forgot that they were witches in the 18th or 19th century. But monsters were just known by society and cast out as they were targeted to be, put in cages or whatever.
Yeah, some of this, I was thinking, some of this can be massaged together, like the monsters that they're putting into captivity are monsters that have, lost their higher functioning thoughts, but other parts of the story don't mesh up with what we saw. They do have the people change the way they thought about magic, but they make it sound in director's cut like it's just, we don't like this magic stuff anymore. Whereas in the episode, it's literally, we like this technology better, and so magic is like, okay, fine, if I'm not wanted, all these things aren't magical anymore. How do you like that?
Right, I want to know how it all ties together, because I want to understand, I don't want the same problem that happened in Steven Universe, where we were questioning for so long, how come the citizens of Beach City seem just comatose, unreactive when put in front of magic? Like, what is their deal? Why do they treat it so naturally? And turned out we never really got our answer, except that we just didn't understand the context of these people's lives enough. Like, this is just their lives, and so they're not particularly shocked by anything happening, per se. Like, they're used to it. I don't know how the knowledge of monsters and magic went away so fast in their world. They could have made it any time period, but it very, very explicitly happened, like, 200 years ago. And, yeah, 200 years ago, people in our country, in our timeline, in the real world, thought that witches were real in Salem, but, like, they weren't actually real. This was, like, a much more widespread thing. Like, witches were everywhere, monsters were everywhere, or, they were in New Jersey.
Well, if the witches forgot they were witches, I think it stands to reason that the people around them also forgot that they were witches.
We just didn't see that happen, I guess.
But it wasn't 200 years ago, it was only like 100 years ago. We have I think somebody figured out what decade in the it might have been 200 years ago. I can't remember which decade in the 1800s they said that fashion looked like.
Yeah, they just didn't really have widespread an electrical grid yet. Although, I don't know what that crane was powered by at the docks. Like, maybe you wouldn't...
Like it have steam. Electricity isn't the only form of power.
Right, but maybe that's closer to turn of the 20th century technology. Anyway, I don't think Summer Camp Island, there was a several 100-year period. Like, it seems to be relatively following our timeline. So it's just interesting that they put themselves in this situation where all this stuff happened really fast and I don't know how. But that's okay, because why am I trying to figure out what the canonical timeline of the show is? There's a psychic mailbox to observe instead.
Well, I'm the kind of person who's going to sit here and I'm going to obsess over stuff. Like, okay, so in director's cut, he said, oh yeah, well, most magical stuff just ended up here. But in the Susie and Ramona episodes, they make it pretty clear that everyone is aware that the witches are on this mission to restore magic to the rest of the world. So don't they know that magic specifically retreated to this island? Like, come to think of it, aren't the aliens pretty magical? And it was all the magic in the universe retreating to the island. So how come the aliens are still aliens? Like, how come they don't have jobs like running dry cleaners in Arizona or something?
But are aliens is their stuff powered by magic or it's powered by sugar? Question mark? That's a power in this universe. I mean, remember, this is coming from an Adventure Time, at least some people. Adventure Time's world was powered by, fire and water and candy. Who knows what the forces are?
I mean, some would say that sugar itself is magical.
Or it could be its own, lumpiness. It could be its own distinct thing. We always forget about umami, right? As a category of flavor in American food. That could be the, umami form of magic in the world. Maybe there's different flavors to it. I don't know. But there was a psychic mailbox.
That was nice.
They were adorable, on a single wooden wheel. Just had the word psychic written on the side. Mailbox stick-on letters. I mean, that's just perfect. And I love their interaction.
I think Summer Camp Island is at its strongest when it's just using its premise as an excuse to add in oddball little stuff like the psychic mailbox, which is amazing to us, but it's a fact of life, even to someone like Oscar.
Well, and the queen of all trees, which happens to be next to the umps.
That killed me when she addressed it. Was she addressing Oscar or Hedgehog as her liege? That doesn't make any sense. I didn't see any king trees around for her to be talking to.
Well, it could be a different monarchy structure over there amongst the trees of Summer Camp Island.
That's a very different nobility structure if she's referring to the campers as her liege.
I'd believe it. On this island.
Only on this island.
Also, so where is this island? In the Susie and Ramona episodes, it kind of looked like it was in the middle of the Atlantic. In this episode, very clearly, on Lum's package, we see that it's in Massachusetts. Or at least an island off of Massachusetts. Of course, it looks like an island that's really off of Massachusetts in the Susie and Ramona episodes. What do you think about that?
I don't know. I mean, I think we're right there on the level of its magic. I ain't gotta explain it.
Has it been floating? It does. There are some things to think about here. These parents sent their kids off to this camp and they rode on a boat. If it was in the middle of Atlantic, that would be is it 16 hours multi-day journey on the ocean?
Yeah, you wouldn't be taking a ferry into the Atlantic. I assume the original plan was for it to be not far from the coast of Massachusetts.
But then did they decide it was too magical?
They decided to hype the danger up in the Susie Ramona episodes.
I mean, there are a lot of details adding up that really make it feel like they started steering the ship in a new direction for season 3. So, I don't know. I'm starting to be more convinced that it is retcon myself now. But that's okay.
All right.
That's okay. Long, strong tradition of retconning, again, from the Adventure Time days. But that's okay.
I eagerly await the Summer Camp Island monthly comic book.
Something well supported, though, by this show forever is that Oscar's a sweet, sweet, sweet boy. And I love how adorable his parents are at thinking about him as a baby, but in a very, loving way. And Oscar does not deserve to have adulthood thrust on him. And I'm glad that it's just barely a part of this episode, or that, that's his motivation for filming, is that he wants to prove he's not a baby making up stories. And the emphasis is really on the making up stories part, not so much the I'm an immature child thing. It's kind of there. But he needs to feel room, to just be him. And he's so sweet.
Thankfully, everyone is so supportive of Oscar. I mean, except for Susie, but she's Susie.
I'd like the room that Hedgehog gives Oscar when they're, plotting right outside of Susie's house. And Hedgehog's like, do you remember the Contu snake? Do you remember this? And Oscar, she just gives him so much room to just, yeah. Oh, yeah, I remember that. It's so freaking adorable.
Oh, since we're going to talk about that little bit, I loved Susie's response to technology. I feel very similar when I am torn away from my PC and handed a smartphone and said, "Here, GC, this is a computer now." And I'm like, "No, it isn't."
What? And it says Japan on the side. What is this thing? And I love that she has to get the last word in with the smoke detector.
Okay, to be fair to her, that smoke detector probably is sapient and probably is backsassing her.
Yeah,
so.
No, it cursed her out. That singular beep had the distinct quality tone of being a curse. I loved it. I also like that, Summer Camp Island is paying attention to viewers who are really worried about, justifications, avoiding cartoon logic, right? Because Oscar clarifies that he always carries a little pencil in his back pocket, which is why he's able to write it on the package, which is hilarious. Like, they could have just had him have a pencil. No one would have questioned it. It's a cartoon. And yet, they decide to explain that.
Exactly. I don't think that they are avoiding the cartoon,
No, of course not. Of course not.
Conundrum. I think they are lip shading, obviously.
Yeah.
It's like they had to do that. It's like, on Invader Zim, I hope the Urkins just so happen to use the exact same operating system as me. And what do you know? The same exploits that existed in the Membrane OS or whatever he was using, it just so happened to also exist in the Urk OS.
Well, to be fair, Independence Day did it first, but they weren't as self-aware of it.
And they did it best.
But also, so I guess Oscar, when it threw me off first when he said, he's filming Ava, and he's like, oh, that could just be a guy in a suit. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, it's just a person wearing a mailman's hat in a trailer, or, what, your parents, that's just normal. But then I realized, oh yeah, I guess monsters. I'm so used to this world, you'd think, well, any kind of, animal could exist, and monsters are just an animal. But I guess in their world, monsters would look like monsters, and they're very distinct, and I guess Yetis would be the same, and all these creatures that they don't think exist. But it was funny to me because I realized I wasn't in the same frame of mind as the animal characters. I'm like, you live in a world of cartoon characters. What are you talking about?
Just imagine the same thing if we were doing a documentary and we had a blue person. And it's like, on the island there are people who are blue, they're red, they're green, they're orange. And this is just normal. But, a person who is used to, what we would consider normal skin tones would immediately pick that out. So I guess there are just no animals that look like those specific monsters.
Right, which
in New Jersey and elsewhere.
What I want a scene where the aliens show up and they're like, everyone's like screaming aliens, like when they appear in New Jersey, which to us, you're just like, I don't know, some weird dog thing. I don't know. But they're like, that's an alien. It's just very clearly an alien to them. It would be terrifying.
The only way that I can imagine the aliens showing up in New Jersey would be the king leaning on Puddle, holding a beer bottle in his hand, already very, very drunk, and proclaiming, let's party.
Okay.
And then everyone freaks out, and he's wondering why everyone is partying. Like, Oscar, your parents party really weird. I'm gonna go back home. This isn't my scene.
Of all the visions you've had, things that are likely to happen in a show, that one is one of my favorites. That is the most likely thing that would happen in New Jersey.
Hey, they're on HBO Max now, so they can bust out the old Looney Tunes XXX Amber bottle for me.
Oh, God. I just want, I don't know why. I think Vidalia with her rifle and Steven Universe can come on and join the alcohol fuel party.
It was a double barrel shotgun, actually.
Oh, excuse me. What am I saying? I should have known that. It's very clearly that. Yeah, they haven't really pushed the envelope ever since, Steven Universe was like hot dog in hand, and then it just became a hot dog stand. I feel like
wiener in hand.
Wiener in hand. Actually, that's much worse.
Much worse. Somebody call Alec Baldwin. We have a third delicious dish skit. Actually, it's basically just a second, but
they've really, I don't know. They've cut back on that in some ways. Although you look at like Animaniacs on Hulu and, some places. But that cartoon doesn't really feel actually aimed at kids. I feel like the sort of just being explicitly sort of gross or crude is not looked at with the same sort of like love anymore. Like the types of jokes they want to tell. Like look at Summer Camp Island. You get a lot of enjoyability out of it, even as an adult. But not because it's like, oh, haha, wink, wink, look at this joke above these kids' heads. It can rarely happen, but it's more like just in the aesthetic of the show and the content and the way the characters talk is just enjoyable, and it doesn't really matter what age you are. Like, yeah, Adventure Time did it. You had Jake explaining the 15 tiers or whatever. It's a thing, but even then, it's in the ridiculousness of what he's saying that it's funny, compared to just being like, haha phallic thing, so. But, I do enjoy my Patrick Star building up sand and licking it before it becomes a lamp, as much as the next guy.
SpongeBob, say what you will about SpongeBob, had a very varied experience.
Lots of adult humor in those first 3 seasons. Lot more just like an adult cartoon for kids, but
What else to say? I mean, I guess my big question about this episode that we haven't addressed yet is, am I to understand that Howard really was stopping in the bush to get the bathroom on his way to a costume party?
Perfect ending!
Or am I to understand that he was messing with them?
No.
I don't understand what I'm supposed to walk away from this episode thinking.
No, okay, so first of all, I'm glad that this is how we can end the podcast, perfectly tying in with what we're talking about, that borderline, what's adult humor, what's complete child potty humor. No, that's exactly what Howard was doing. The humor of it is that, it's supposed to look suspicious and like he could only somehow be hiding in a bush wearing that if he was trying to fool them. But in fact, he really was going to a costume party in a ridiculous costume. And 2, he uses the bathroom in the bush. I mean, that's what he does. He is not happy, he's doing the classic, I'm just trying to do my own business on my own, as he climbs down the mountain. And that's that is what we now know about Howard. It was a very personal thing that he was not interested in sharing freely, and he was outed in front of everyone. And surprisingly crude for Summer Camp Island. They'll do farts and stuff, but it's a weird thing for people to do. Use the bathroom in bushes.
Now, since you mentioned the cliff, we had a perfect stopping point, but I have to keep going just a little bit longer. I loved just the casual way they're like, okay, we're gonna get Oscar and Hedgehog up this cliff. We're not gonna mention this to either of us or to them. It's just gonna happen, and it's like we do this all the time at Summer Camp Island.
Yeah,
that was great.
They're good at scaling rad cliffs.
I mean, it's rad the way they scale them. Anyway, guys, that's been us on Director's Cut. Join us next week. Until then, I'm GC13.
And I'm David. Don't forget to leave us a loving review on iTunes or anywhere else you listen to podcasts.
Later, everybody. Our opening and closing music is by Mark Soto. For more cartoon-related content, please visit lunarseaspire.com.